more love. Thank you so much for that. God is all there is. And God includes everything, all possibility and all action. For spirit is the indivisible essence of all form. That's a quote from Ernest Holmes. God is all there is. So today, we are finishing our series on open communication for this month. And the talk title for this day is The Art of Inclusion. So the spiritual principle that I'm working with here today is that God is everywhere. Ernest Holmes said in that quote, "Spirit is the indivisible essence in all form." Indivisible means you can't divide it. It is the base principle. It's the base of everything. All form and all things are God. So when we recognize that God is at the base of everything, God is everything and everywhere, what does that mean for us? It means recognizing this spiritual truth and living like it's true. Not living like, well, this bad thing happened to me, so that's not God. We don't believe in God and another power. We believe there is one power, one presence, one infinite, and that is God. And so when we recognize that, it changes our lives because it changes how we live and how we view the world. It's powerful. It's the omnipresence of God. Everywhere present is God. And that is the indivisible essence of all form that Ernest is speaking about. So God being everywhere, in everything, nothing is separated from God. Have you gotten the message somewhere in your life that you have to do something in order to be included by God? To repair a relationship that is broken? Many religions look at this, and so they try to get people to come in and say, you have to do something in order to repair that relationship. And what we know in religious science is that God is everywhere. There is no way that we can be out of sync with God unless we choose to turn our mind in another direction. So there's nothing we have to do. There's no blood of Jesus that we have to be washed in. We look at a metaphysical standpoint. And so in that metaphysical standpoint, we're saying, what is that salvation? What is the salvation that Christian religions are talking about here? They name it as Jesus. For us, Jesus, yes, he was the great example for our lives. He was a great example because he knew he and the Father were one. He knew that omnipresence of God. Nowhere he went would he be separated from God. Nothing that he said or did could separate him from the Father, from that one presence. We are that same way. Jesus said, all the things I do, you can do and more. And it's when we know that consciousness from within, that God is everywhere, that we are one with that we can use that power, that we can speak our word of power and bring into form what it is that we want in our lives. We are powerful, creative, spiritual beings. Do you believe it?
Yes.
Maybe I need an amen.
Amen.
So every judgment that we make against other people or even against ourselves is a way that we separate ourselves from God. And that separation, as I just explained, is not a physical one, it's a mental one. It's when we turn our minds to look at something else and say, that's not God. I did a little experiment in school. Every year we did a spring retreat at our campus. Now, it was a really rough retreat because we went on a cruise. But we stopped one time, and I can't remember where it was, but it was like Costa Rica, something like this. And so we went into this little town, and the town was not really prosperous. They didn't have a big dock for the cruise ship to pull in, so we had to dock out in the ocean, and they ferried us in on little boats, and then we could get off. Well, I had an assignment for that retreat, and it was to go through the island and find a place where God was not. It was fun, because we got to go and walk through there. I was walking through with one of my teachers, and we would look at things, and she looked at all these power lines that were coming together at this one intersection, and she said, "Does that look like God?" And I said, "Yes, because God is power, and those are power lines. And so God is in the power that's being expressed there." And we walked on, and we saw this little recycling compost kind of pile. It's a big pile, actually. And I pointed to that, and I said, "Is God in that?" And she said, "Oh, yes, because God is about change. And we have these cycles in life. And so here this stuff has lived its life, and now it's returning back to the earth, and it's creating something new. We can never destroy energy. God is energy." And so as we walked through the island, we knew there was not a place that God was not. God was in everything that we looked at. The little kids playing, the amazing breadfruit that was hanging from the tree. It was so much fun to see God everywhere and to be conscious of that. And so when we recognize that God is in everything, we cannot separate ourselves from that. We see other people, and do we separate ourselves? Do we have a them and us mentality? Because we're all one. And we're all one because we're all God. At our core, at our essence, we are all one. There is a book that several of our talks have referenced this month, and it's called, I might have a slide on this, Gracism. There. Gracism, the Art of Inclusion. And so today our final talk this month is the art of inclusion here. We talked about gracism, and gracism is when we look at our prejudice, when we look at things that make us feel separated or allow us to feel separated from other people, and then we add God to it. It takes the racism and we put God in it, and the G from God creates the grace. And so what do we do to extend grace to people? In this book, there's a story about Greg Bayer. Greg Bayer was a very successful eye surgeon. He was happily married. He had 7 children. He had no direction in life. And he came to find himself in his backyard with a gun in his mouth. And he woke up and realized, I need to change my life. All of this success is not making me happy. And I need to change my life. What he recognized was something that started him as an author. So he quit being an eye surgeon, and he has now authored 13 different books. And all of his books have the same theme. And the same theme is unconditional love. And how we were raised, he says the majority of people were raised with conditional love. I have a son. Don't we control people like this? You know, you want my love, you do what I tell you to. So we do that often without even thinking. And unconditional love, if we were raised with unconditional love, seeing that we could do whatever we wanted and it would not separate the child and the parent, that's the love that God has for us. No matter what we do, No matter how much we might try to deny God or say, I'm not going that path, this doesn't work for me, God still loves us. And when we will turn to God, God will turn to us. Because it's all around us. It's waiting to embrace us, to love us. In fact, it's embracing us and loving us even when we're not recognizing it. It helps us to get through life, to create the life that our thoughts are creating. So on a spiritual path, we recognize that God is for us. And the big point here is that we don't have to do anything in order to earn that love. It is unconditional love. And so, recognizing God is love. It's unconditional. It frees us up to experiment with life. If we're being loved unconditionally, can we start loving others unconditionally? Oh my gosh. What do we do to look at people? Do we see them as us? Or do we set up all the separation? Do we say, you have a different color skin, you speak a different language, you have a different sex, you dress funny, you wear something that is not my religion, a yarmulke, maybe a red dot on your forehead, maybe a prayer shawl. Well, we don't do that in my church. Can you be open to that? Because it's all God. And it doesn't matter whether we look alike, sound alike, act alike. We're all unique expressions of the one. And that's what makes life so rich. When we can open ourselves to new things, to new ideas and new ways of being. So stick with me here for just a minute and see if we can make this leap in consciousness. If we're one with God, if we know that we cannot be separated from Spirit, and God is unconditional love, then we're God. God is unconditional love. Aren't we unconditional love? Woohoo! Yes! If we choose to. And it's our choice. Life is about choices. And so do we want to develop that consciousness within us that we are unconditional love? And when we see people in the street, in the world, that we can reach out to them, that we can love them and share with them from our own heart and our own compassion. Because that's love, that's God loving God. And we're all God. Do you get it? Does it make sense? Good. Amen. Yes. So, as we move through life, you will find things that people will tell you will be one way. You don't have to believe them. When we went to Paris on a vacation, we were told people in Paris were not friendly to Americans. And don't expect for people to help you. Well, what we found, I would come up out of the subway and have my map there, trying to figure out, okay, what street am I by? What's the intersection, and where do I need to go to find the museum or restaurant or wherever we were going? And I can't tell you the number of times that we had people come up and say, can I help you? They didn't speak French because they knew we were American. Somehow they could tell that. But they would say, can I help you? And so it was such a welcoming embrace, but that's what I expected. Now, I was told the French people will not be welcoming to you. Then when we stayed in England for a week, the English guy at the bed and breakfast said, oh no, the Parisians, they will be fine with you. It's the English that they hate. See how we get told these things? And you can believe that or you cannot. You can choose to see God is everywhere and in all of us, or you can separate us. And so it was a good experience because I found that people were willing to help. They wanted to be helpful. Living in South Florida for the last 6 years, we knew that this was a destination for many tourists. They would come to the beach. So if I'm walking along the beach, I made it a spiritual practice for me to offer to help people. Have you been on vacation? Do you know when you come back from vacation with your family, somebody's always missing in the picture, right? Because they're the one taking the picture. And so my spiritual practice was when I found family that was taking pictures by the beach, I would go up and offer to take the picture for them. Do you want to get in the picture? Let me take it so that you'll all be there. And most people were very appreciative of that. Oh yes, oh that'd be great. So paying attention to be able to help. There were a few people that looked at me very strange and would not, no. And what I learned was they were afraid I was going to take their cell phone and run. And that was their consciousness. So what do we expect to see in the world? If we expect to see good and people helpful, then that's what will show up for us. And if we expect people to be leery about us, to not accept us, then that's what we will find. In the book, Gracism, there's another story that the author talks about, and it's an experiment that they did with 10 interviewees. That's 4. 10 interviewees. I don't know where I am this morning. And what they did was each of the 10 people, before they went into the interview, they rubbed their cheek and they said, "We're putting a red dot on your cheek." And so when you're in the interview, pay attention to if the interviewer stares at your red dot or seems to notice it. And so what happened was the people went in, 10 people went in to the interviews at different times. They all came out, and then the experimenter said, "Did the interviewer look at your red dot?" All 10 of them said, "Yes, they stared at my red dot the whole time." It was impossible because only 5 of them had a red dot on their cheek. The other 5, it was an invisible red dot. They just rubbed their cheek and they didn't put a red dot on it. What do we expect out of life? Is our mindset one of we're all one? We're going to get along? Everything is great? Let me support you? Or is it you're staring at my red dot? Alan, why are you doing that? You're making me feel funny. We all, I would say, have a red dot. It might be something visible, like a physical challenge. It might be the color of our skin. It might be clothes that we wear that we know somebody is going to say this is not in style. It's whatever our mind is going to block us from receiving our good. Or it may be an invisible dot that we carry. It may be a childhood trauma that we went through and we're still carrying that with us. It might be sexuality. It might be something else. Your job that you don't think is really the best and you don't want anybody to know what you're doing. We all have those invisible dots that we carry with us. And we can use that to separate us from other people, or we can embrace others. We can get past that mental thinking of people are staring at this, people are judging this, and move to a place of it's all God, it's all love. That's where I want to live, and that's where I choose to live, and that's how I'm seeing life. It's that law of reflection. So life is going to reflect back to us what it is that we say and do. Another example in this book was offering grace to people. And I think when we step out of our comfort zone, when we move forward, we are able to offer grace to one another. Grace, God, coming into the relationship. The story was a lady who was a congregant of the writer of the book. This was Reverend David something. Can't think of his last name, but it was there. But Reverend David had this woman in his congregation, and he had brought this whole series on gracism and offering grace to people. And so this woman was traveling, and she was at the Southwest Airlines counter. Have you been to Southwest Airlines?
Yeah.
You know how they line you up? And it's Group A, Group B, Group C, 1 through 60, blah, blah, blah. You got to figure out what your ticket is and where you go. Well, this woman was standing there, and she said this Spanish-speaking family came up to the gate, and they couldn't figure out where they were supposed to be, and they kept wandering around, and they tried to talk to several people, but nobody could speak enough Spanish to really explain to them where they needed to be. And this woman said she was getting irritated with them. She just wanted them to go away. And then, as they wandered around and nobody could help them, she remembered this concept of gracism, of offering grace to people, getting outside of your comfort zone, to extend love and compassion to people that are different from you, if you choose to see them as different. And so she said, I began to feel guilty. And I looked around to see what I could do. And she said, I realized that there were spaces in front of me in line, and that's where they were supposed to be. So she touched the mother on the arm, and she said, I couldn't speak but a few words of Spanish, but she tried to get the mother to come over, and she started gesturing with her arms. And the mother realized what she was saying. Come, this is your place right in front of me here. And so she and the family moved over there and got in line to board the plane. She said the woman was teary-eyed in gratitude and had such relief on her face because somebody helped her to find her place in the world or in this line. Are we willing to extend grace to people like that? Are we willing to step out of our comfort zone, to go beyond our normal limits, to offer something to someone else? That's offering grace. That's being the living, breathing God, Spirit, compassion in the world. And that's a world that works for me. That can be a world that works for you. And so I invite you to contemplate this week, how can I help others feel accepted in the world? And what service can I do for others? That will be grace that you're offering. Offering to life, offering to the universe. And as you do that, you will find that that same grace will come back to you in your life. Will you pray with me? There is one power, one presence, one God, one love. And I know that it is in us, as us, and through us. We are each individual expressions of God, and such rich diversity in this world. We love it and we embrace it, and we know that it's all God and it's all good. And so in that unity of knowing our oneness, I just speak a word of blessing for each of us as we move forth from this place into our individual lives, that we embrace the grace that we've been given, and we share that grace with others, knowing that it creates a world that works for everyone. And we do our part to show up as the loving compassion of Spirit everywhere. I release my word, and together we say, so it is.